interesting story about Indianapolis. I was playing at Michigan Tech, and we played U of Indy. And at that time, we unfortunately set the record for most throwing yards. uh, Matt Cohn threw for 746 against us. They beat us by 2. They got a safety to win the game, but it was the most points scored by 2 teams and the most most yards thrown by a quarterback in D2 history.
Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. I'm your host, Andre The Beast Crayton. Yolanda M. Smith is out doing her thing with Brandon for Success, and we'll be back on the next episode. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of being a father, the presence of being a father, the role models that fathers need to do, and exactly what fathers go through. On the show today, we have no other than Rod Richards. Rod, what's going on, big guy?
How you doing, man? I'm excited to be here.
Let me rephrase that. Rod Richard II. Big Rod. I had to get that right.
I've grown, right? And so now you don't call me Little Rod anymore. I think my grandma might be the only one that called me Little Rod.
This is about that beast frame of mind, and I've been following your Instagram page called Forfeit Fatherhoods. Explain that real quick before we get into you and your journey, because we was rapping before the show actually started. But tell me a little bit about the forfeit for fatherhood.
Yeah, so Forfeit Fatherhood kind of came about because and there's obviously more to it, but I felt like there are 4 pillars of fatherhood that kind of hold up the family or hold up that part of your life, and it's faith, family, finance, and fitness. And they're not always in that particular order. It just depends on where you are in your life. But I think those 4 things kind of always come back around. As a father, you are the leader of your household. So, whatever your faith is, then I'll let you choose whatever that is. I'm not going to put any faith on any particular person, but whatever that is, you pass that along into your family, and you operate kind of based on that faith. Fitness, obviously, if you enjoy being a father as much as I enjoy being a father, then you're gonna have to take care of your fitness if you want to be around to be a grandfather, be a great grandfather.
I want to be on
right. You don't want to be the old man that's in the back room, in the bed. I want to be out there opening gifts and wrestling with my grandkids. So, taking care of your fitness is extremely important as a father and as a man in general.
Right.
Finances, I think we all understand that finances is super important when you have a family to support or you have children, because they are not cheap. And if we are always talking about we want to provide a life for our children that we didn't have, that's going to have to take some extra additional finances. So financial literacy and things like that. And then family, obviously, your father, right? So family goes without saying. Family is an important part. And so initially, when I started the Instagram, it was like I had like a schedule, right? I was like super regimented. It was a faith post and a family post. And since then, man, I've just been kind of like, when something hits me, I just post it. And it sometimes it's me, sometimes it's something that I see. And I'm constantly researching and digging and reading and watching videos. And so sometimes you'll see something that has nothing to do with fatherhood, right? Somebody said something,
that too, but it was cool.
Yeah, it's like it, but like everything does, right? When you're a father, it's like what they call a reticular activating system. Like when you buy a red car, now all the cars are red. It's like that. Like when I start thinking about fatherhood, like all this stuff starts to relate. And if you really look at it, you can build yourself as a man and as a father through all these different avenues. And it's not just the fatherhood stuff.
So tell me about yourself. Tell me who Rod Richard II, Big R, Big 2 is.
So first and foremost, I'm a father, right? And that's that's why I'm here, right? I'm a father of 2 girls, 8 and 10. I'm a husband. I'm a brother. I'm a son, right? I'm from Richmond, California. Was born in Oakland, raised in Richmond. My mother and father were both from big families. So I got a bunch of cousins and a bunch of aunts. And when I was young, the family was really, really tight. My grandmother had enough, my mom's mom had enough success she bought a house for every child that she had. And so we all lived in the same neighborhood. until I was probably about 8. So everybody was there, right? It was like, it wasn't a family reunion. You just went across the street, Yeah. You might make
Go
dinner
get
at
some
your
sugar
house, and
from.
yeah, everybody showed up. Like it
Yeah.
was one of those things. Like Tuesday night we was going to Auntie Trisha's house, and Wednesday night we was at Auntie BB's. Like it was like that. And that is something that I always cherished. And it kind of, is the 80s, 80s, 90s in the Bay Area was, crack epidemic kind of hit us hard in
Right.
that area. And that kind of caused the deterioration of our family. People either got involved in using or got involved in selling, or just kind of found ways to find themselves in trouble.
How bad did
And
it
that
dismember the family? How bad did it dismember the family?
I mean, they were still close, but houses got sold, cars got sold. That all living together was no longer. I say by the time I was 9.5, about to turn 10, nobody lived in that neighborhood anymore.
Really?
Everybody was gone, had sold their house, or something happened where they didn't have the level of income to keep that up.
Did the
Um,
gentrification process have a big effect in California?
It does. It does. It did in different areas. Like it's funny because when we eventually moved to an area in the East Bay. And when we moved out there, it wasn't a whole lot of us, right?
Yeah,
But now 20, almost 30 years later,
different
it ain't nothing but us. Right. And now they have moved back to Oakland and Richmond. And like now we can't even get back into those areas. Like
Yeah.
the areas we were running away from, they're back now. And if you look at the housing prices in Oakland, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Um, and it wasn't that way. So yeah, they let us get up out, and then they moved in and moved us out again.
Gentrification is a motherfucker, dog.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy because we were looking at getting my wife and I were looking at getting a house in Oakland. And I was like, yo, it's not worth it. It is not worth it. And not for the
So why do you
size of
think
house
it's
we're gonna
not?
get.
Why you say it's not worth it? Because of the price?
Well, yeah, the prices. And you know what? It's not that it's not worth it. It's just that because I have that reference of I know what it used to cost. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I know what, like, this is a neighborhood that people did not want to be in at
And
one
now it's different.
point. Yeah, like I didn't even want to be, like, my head was on a swivel in this neighborhood, but now it's an $800,000 house and it's 1,1400 square feet. Like
Mhm.
that's not, that value doesn't make sense to me, but that is what it is now. So I don't want to say it's not worth it, but not worth it with my frame of reference for sure.
Tell me about what it was like growing up in your house in your house in general with because the show today is about their fatherhood. What was it like in your house with your relationship with your father?
So me and my dad were really, really close. And the cool part about it is that my dad, even though my uncles lived in the neighborhood, they weren't like super involved in the stuff we did. Like I remember my uncles, but they didn't really do stuff with us. But my dad was like the dad of the family, right? Even to this day, like my older cousins are always asking me, what's your dad up to? And he hasn't been in a part of my family since I was like, of that side of the family, since
Mhm.
I was 6.
Right.
But he was the fun dad, right? We'd come over, we go do stuff together. He would be grilling. He was always making stuff. Like my cousins all the boy cousins for sure, they were at my house all the time, right? And so my dad was a fun dad. And so when they
What's a
left, I
fun
still
dad? I know the viewers are like, what do you, how old were you and what do you consider the fun dad? So people can understand when you say fun dad.
so he would ride bikes with us. Skateboarding had kind of got big at that time. We lived on a
Yeah.
hill. I remember him riding down the hill on the skateboard. He sat down. He didn't stand up like we were because we were crazy. But he
Yeah.
sat on it. He rode down the hill one time. He took us to like baseball games, and like he used to do like the fun stuff. He wrestled with us. Like, he used to do all the fun stuff. He would play hide and seek. Like he was fully involved in whatever it is we wanted to do.
Why do
Right.
you
And
think
so,
that why do you think your uncles wasn't as hands-on as your father? Like what made to you growing
mhm.
older now, what do you think was the transition between your dad being the fun dad, but he still had brothers, and what was the difference that you saw in your dad versus your uncles who also had kids?
That's interesting. Looking at it now, my dad and his brothers are all like that. They've always like my dad's brothers have always been what I would consider the fun uncles. Because any one of them, you can hang out with any one of them, and it's gonna be a good time
Okay.
at any age of my life. My mom's brothers are, for whatever reason, they don't mess around too much. You know what I mean? Like now I just talked to my oldest uncle on my mom's side, and now like I consider him to be fun, and he's laughing and joking. But they were really really serious when we were younger, and
Oh,
I don't know why. And it's funny because my mom comes from a two-parent household, my dad comes from a single-parent household, but like they had their dad there, and my grandfather was a super strict and stern dude. So I guess that makes sense. Is that that's the type of men that they became, and
mhm.
they don't play around. Maybe they do now, right? But when we were kids, it was like kids stay in a kid's place, and most of the time that's out of our face.
Okay.
And you know what I mean. And so that wasn't their thing. They just didn't do it. And so I honestly I don't know why. You would think it would be different, but I think my dad and his brothers went to the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like we didn't have a dad around, so we're gonna be super dads kind of thing. And they were like, we're gonna be just like our dad and be strict and
What,
stern or whatever. So
what was some of the things you remember about your dad growing up that has impacted you now, and what are some of the things that happened with your dad that you looked at that said, you know what, I want to do something a little bit different?
well, like I said, being the fun dad part, that for sure is something that I took from him and that I exercise with my kids, trying to be involved in the things that they're involved in, be interested in the things that they're interested in, even if it's not really interesting to me, right? Like I'm watching little kid TV shows that I don't really care about, but I'm invested in them now, I want to watch the next episode. Um, that kind of thing is something that, that involvement when he was there, when we were living together, level of involvement is something that I always try to make sure that I do. One thing that, and I think that has impacted me the most is that I mentioned the epidemic of drugs in the 80s. My father found himself struggling in a drug battle, trying to get out of it. And that's what eventually led to him and my mom getting divorced and him not being present in my life for a number of years. And then eventually being like partially present due to custody issues. And that's something I never want my children to experience. And so it has really impacted me in how I father them, but then also how I treat their mother, because I want to make sure that we don't end up in that situation. And granted, they both co-parented me really well. My mom and dad, somehow worked it out where they did a good job
How long did it
of
take?
raising me.
How long did it take, and what impact did it really have when you're growing up? Because I think what happens is uh, adults dealing with from my side that I had to go through that custody,
Hmm.
so forth. I'm looking at that to adults, but you've seen it from a child standpoint. Tell me how that affected you.
You know what? And this is something that I've had to work on as I've gotten older, is I'm a very like I'm neutral on a lot of things, right? Because I've seen a lot of things in my life. I've been in some places, and the way my life is shaped out, I'm kind of like anything like it could be worse kind of situation, right? So I don't get too high, I don't get too low. I kind of flow in the middle a lot of times. And so with my parents splitting up, it was no like I was so happy in my life. I didn't realize that things were going south, that they were splitting or that they were breaking up until my mom was just like, "Hey, your dad's not coming back," and he didn't come back. And so then I just took it as it is what it is. Looking back at it now, though, it was tough for me to not have him around. It was tough for me that, when they started working, because divorce makes you really bitter, you
Yeah.
know. And my dad was really good about not ever saying anything negative about my mom. My mom was a little bit more emotional, right? And
Okay.
so she would say stuff about him, and I think it never changed the way I felt about him, but it hurt me that she would say that about this. You one day you're telling me I look just like my dad, I act just like my dad, and the next day you telling me that he ain't shit, and like you know what I mean. Like so now, does that mean that I'm not because I'm just like him? And you say I look, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That caused some conflict for me early on, and then I just got to a point where it was just like, okay, she talking about that. I'm just not even gonna listen right now. You know what I mean? And that did in our relationship with me and my mother. And sometimes I was mad at her because she said something about my dad. Or I resented her sometimes when they got into an argument and I couldn't go see my dad. Okay, that don't have nothing to do with me, you know. Like
How old were you when all this actually took place?
when they were getting divorced.
When they actually
Uh,
separated, and then you had to go back and forth, and then the verbal unnecessariness happens and all this. That way the viewers can understand
yeah,
that I understand, like you said, shit happens and you separate, but even something as significant as what you just said, your dad ain't shit or your mom ain't shit. Okay, you don't need to tell that to your kid,
right,
period. So
right.
now I get you. It's now had an effect on you. You're able to deal with it. But about how old were you when it started to actually happen to you?
Man, I was probably 7 or 8. I think my dad left the house when I was like 5 or 6. And then they, kind of coming back and forth, they're working on relationships. So he would be there sometimes. Sometimes I wake up in the morning, he was making breakfast and then then he wouldn't be there for a while. And then when they finally started the divorce process, and I remember them going to court and custody battles and whatever, I was 7. And what's funny is as far as like those comments from my mom's side may have come at any point in my life where I was living in her house if something happened with my dad. Not so much once we got to like the later years of high school, because at that point it was me and his relationship was me and his relationship. They didn't
Definitely
really,
had changed by then.
yeah, yeah. So they didn't really have to communicate because I could talk to him about whatever, like, oh, I'm coming up and you know what I mean? I'm going to my dad's house. And so I became the conduit between the two of them. So they didn't really have to have any conversation or really any interactions. But I would say, in terms of comments like that, all the way through middle school, while they were still like trying to figure out what was going on between them and how they were going to manage raising me. And they, like I said, they both raised me well, but that venom was still there. Those hurt feelings were still there. Those you're not gonna control me from your house feelings were still there. And so yeah, my mom would say things, would say things for sure.
But from a fatherhood standpoint, you naturally when you get older, you become more wise and
hmm hmm
clairvoyancy happens to take over. What happened with you and your dad's relationship? Did your mom remarry? Did another man come into the picture? Did that handicap the relationship with your biological father? Give me a little bit on that.
Yeah. So
If that even happened.
right around the time my dad kind of got himself back on his feet, my mom had already been seeing somebody while my dad was kind of cleaning himself up and getting his life together. So my dad gets himself back on his feet, gets a apartment, and is working. My mom gets married right around the same time, and my stepdad, and I, I didn't, and this is why I probably don't talk to him now. Is we really never had a relationship. He was the man in the house, sorry, man of the house, but he wasn't the man in the house. Like he wasn't there. Not to say that he wasn't a man, but he was working so much to provide for the household that I very rarely got to spend time with him on any regular basis at all. Right? I played football, I played baseball. I remember him coming to my senior night. And I remember him coming to one of my Pop Warner games. I don't remember him at any baseball games. I don't remember him at any other football games. And maybe it's because those games were significant somewhere in my mind. And so I remembered him being there. But most of the times he was at work on Friday nights, especially in high school. Saturday mornings, he was sleeping because he worked all Friday nights. So those Pop Warner games he missed, and so he wasn't there for any of those moments. I don't remember any birds and bees conversations. I don't remember any like you're about to be a man conversations and this and not that I think then I faulted him for it. Like then I resented him for it
Did your
because
father, so that was your stepfather, but was your biological father at these games that you hold?
yeah. So yeah, my biological father was at every game. He went to every game. He didn't miss them. Whatever sport it was, he was there. And maybe that was something I didn't know. Maybe they worked that out, right? Because my mom didn't go to a lot of my games either. Um,
How did that make you look at your stepfather? Because you were still young. People need to realize you're still young. So
yeah.
was there, did you look at your stepfather any differently than your biological father? Because those things were important to you.
hmm
And
I,
the guy that's no longer in your house is there, but your mom has gone on with her life. And now you have two men that you have to deal with. You have to
mhm.
sort this. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think early on, um, I wanted to have him involved. My stepfather, I wanted to have him involved because from what I heard, he's from Florida, and from what I had heard from him and from he had two daughters who were older, and from like his family that we had kind of met in different trips or different visits, that he was really good at football. Like he was super dominant in his high school, but then he went to the military after high school, didn't go to college, but it was like well known in his area for football, for track. Um, it, and I wanted to because I play football. I'm like, oh man, you can show me stuff. We can go out and play catch. You can. It never happened. Like I remember one time in my life, and I was probably 10. We went to the park and played catch. Um, and so like I was always wondering like why didn't you want to do that, or why didn't you want to share that with me or help me with that. But I got over it. Like I just realized, like I say, I'm in the middle. It didn't happen. Whatever. It could be worse. Like he could be not caring about me at all. So
Right.
it's whatever. So I let it go and didn't really trip off of it. Funny enough, though, I don't remember doing that with my real dad either. Like going to the park and playing catch or whatever.
He was at every football and
But
baseball
he was,
game, though.
but he cared. He was buying me cleats, and he was, he was at the games, and he talked to me about games, and he talked to me about practices and things that were going on. So I almost felt like he didn't have to because he was living it with me, right? I just wanted him. I wanted my stepdad to be involved somehow, some way, and it just didn't happen. And so I just chalked it up as that's not who he is. He's just
Did
going
you
to be
talk
the
to your
guy that.
mom about your feelings about your stepdad
Nah,
versus your real
nah,
dad?
nah.
Because she was still dealing with your
Yeah, no, well, I don't even know at that age. I don't know if you think it through that much, but I
right.
think I had, like I say, I'm not. I'm. My wife would tell you for the first couple years that we were in high school, but before we got older and have a real relationship, she would say I was not emotional. I had no emotions. That was her thing. Like Mister No Emotions is what she would call me. It's because like I said, I had a life where I
Who
just was
said that
like
to you? Your wife?
my wife.
She called you Mr.
Yeah,
No Emotions?
no emotions, right? Because I'm not up, I'm not down, I'm in the middle. Like everything is kind of water off a duck's back. Like it could be worse, right? The
Right,
situation
right.
could be worse. So whatever's going on is just whatever. Um, like I said, I when here's probably why, and I guess I should probably give you some frame of reference on why I say that is
Yeah, please.
when we were living where all our family was, we were living in the suburbs of Richmond, which Richmond is like at one point the National Guard was patrolling the city on a regular basis. Like we had a curfew.
And this is where, California?
California. So Richmond is 15 minutes northwest of Oakland,
Okay.
right? And so, 80s, 90s, Richmond was not a very good place to live, right? So we lived like on the outskirts of it, a nice neighborhood, big houses, my whole family's there, right? Then everything happens, parents get divorced. We end up moving to the south side of Richmond, like deep into Richmond, on a dead end street. And if you not a cul-de-sac, right? We would call it a cul-de-sac now. This was a dead end street. Like at the end of the street, it said dead end. Um, on the corner of that street, there's an apartment complex, but this apartment complex is basically, if you've seen, you watch Snowfall.
Yeah.
Okay, so the apartment complex where dang, I can't remember his name in Snowfall, but he's Stacy from the Wood. You
Right.
go into there. It's not as bad as that, but this is the gang's apartment complex, basically. And this is 4 houses down from mine. So I go from this nice neighborhood, mixed schools, to now I'm in the hood for real. And this is, I'm a young kid. And so this is the height of drug violence, right? And so these things are houses getting shot up. We're laying on the floor in the middle of the night because they're shooting in the neighborhood.
Really?
Police are knocking on the door because somebody's hiding on our roof. I remember my mom had a Honda Civic, and next to our house was a field, and some dudes got into a little gunfight. We're running through the field, and they shot up her Honda. The front windshield, it went through the hood, so the engine was blown. I've seen drive-bys, not just people drive by and shoot, but like people actually being shot and killed. My cousin and I were taking the bus to the local college to go play football. A guy pulled up, and Jordans were popular at the time. Jordans got taken at gunpoint. Like, first time I had a
Who
gun
got
pulled
taken at
on me.
gunpoint?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Oh my!
Shotgun out the window. Give me those shoes. And
They're
luckily,
the boys in the hood, right?
they threw us some shoes back to put on, like some random too big shoes. Like, they were considerate. They didn't make us go home in our socks. But so when I say like a lot of stuff happens, I'm like, it could be worse, because there were worse things that had happened. So I just, whatever happens, I'm gonna just keep moving forward. And that was kind of always my mindset. And it still is to this day. I'm able to kind of shake things off faster, I think, than a lot of people, just because I have that reference that things could be worse. So when I say that, I just wanted to give you some reference on why I say that.
Because all that happened, did you look at not your mom, this is fatherhood. Did you look at your fathers and say, why? Why are we in this situation?
You know what? No, I never did. And I don't even think I do to this day. I think it was all just a matter of circumstance. Things just kind of happened the way they happened. I wish that they would have been different, because we were living a really nice life. My my dad had a good job. My mom had a good job. We lived with our families all around. So I don't really do stuff like the whys and things like that, or regrets. It's just a part of the process. It's all a part of the journey. I wish it would have been better, but I don't really ask why they didn't do something differently.
How has that changed you moving forward?
Um, I am, I would say, hyper vigilant in trying to make sure that I don't have some of those same pitfalls. Um, I think I mentioned to you in the pre-show questionnaire that I left my job a couple times.
Yeah, I saw that. I was gonna get
uh,
to
the most recent time, I left because I had gotten what my stepdad did teach me, and this is what I'll give him credit for, and my dad too, because my dad just retired, but he has worked 2 jobs my whole life. Um, is that you work hard, you hard work, right? You go out and you work and you provide for your family, and whatever that means. And the job that I left most recently, for about 10 years, I have been working 12 to 16-hour days. And I didn't realize, because I'm really intentional about the time that I spend with my family and my kids, until the pandemic shut all my gyms down. I didn't realize how much time I wasn't actually spending. I was pouring into the hours that I had, but it was only a couple hours. And I was just allowing myself to kind of be okay with that. And, realizing that that was an issue, like I said, hyper vigilant about, like, I'm out. I gotta leave this job, because my family's more important. The first time I left the job was a similar situation. It was like, it was a great opportunity, great job, paid great. It's something that people are aspiring to get to, but
take us
I
back
wasn't going to
a
be
little
able
bit,
to.
because you're right. During the pre thing, you had your first job. Take me back to your first child, so people can understand just how important this whole scenario of fatherhood is to you. Just take me back to the first job and the first child? Because I thought that was really motivating.
Yeah, so I'm a strength and conditioning coach by trade. I was working at a high school as a strength and conditioning coach. Did strength and conditioning for all sports, and I coach football. And when you're working at a high school in the off season when football isn't going on, you're done at 2 o'clock, like 2:30, right? So I had a full day of nothing to do, and I'm not the type to sit on my hands. So I ended up getting a job working at a athletic performance facility in my area, and I was working primarily with baseball athletes and doing a good job, man. I had a good majority of young guys going to college. I had some pro guys that were coming back, and I'm not sure exactly who, but one of those guys dropped my name, and I ended up getting a call from the minor league coordinator from the New York Mets, and he let me know that they had an internship opportunity coming up in the spring, and asked me would I be interested.
Mhm.
So I said yes, of course. Like
Yeah.
professional baseball, like I'm coaching high school kids right now, like professional baseball for sure. And then I didn't hear from him for like a month. He didn't call me back. I submit my application and I hear nothing. So I'm like, oh well, they must have moved on, went with somebody else. And then 2 weeks before spring training, he calls and he's like, hey man, we want to have you come out. We don't want you to intern though. We want you to actually take on a position.
Wow.
Um, can you be here in 2 weeks?
You was like, yeah.
I'm like, I'm gonna have to move some stuff around, but yeah, if the ticket shows up, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be on the plane. And so I took that job, and it's great, right?
Yeah.
Professional sports. If you're a strength and conditioning coach, depending on what sport you really like you may say college is the pinnacle, right? But professional sports, I think we all look at professional sports as being the top of athleticism, right? So being able to work with professional athletes traveling, being a part of these games and this atmosphere was like a dream, right? So I enjoyed my time there, but during my second year, we find out that my wife is pregnant, and I guess I got to frame. So we go to Tahoe for Thanksgiving, right? We get the opportunity to spend some time together because you understand the baseball, like 182 games plus spring training, plus you work in Dominicans like fall ball. You have all these things that people don't really notice going on. You're pretty much working all year.
Right.
Um, and you're away from home, right? Because you're either traveling on the road with the team, or we still lived in California, and majority of the year I'm in either Florida or New York or somewhere else, right? So I'm kind of all over the place. So we finally get some time to spend together. So we book a trip to Tahoe. We go out there. I think it's around Thanksgiving. She wasn't feeling well. And it's winter time, so I'm like, oh, you sick. It's whatever. We'll get some medicine. We go down to the drugstore, get some medicine, and we'll come back to the cabin and we'll chill. And we get down to the drugstore, and she's like, you know what? I think I should get a pregnancy test. And I'm like, for what? Like you just said your stomach hurt. Like you should be fine. Like get some ginger ale. Like Big Mama used to say, get you some ginger ale and lay down.
A
You're gonna
typical
be all
guy.
right. Right? You're tripping. You'll be all right. She's like, no, I think this is different. So I was like, all right, whatever. We've been at that point. We had been together for 11 years. We had done a pregnancy test before. It had,
How
so I'm
how
like,
old were
yeah,
you when all this was taking place?
uh, 28, about to be 29.
Okay. Okay.
So, it's like, if we've done this before, whatever, go pee on the stick, we'll be good. And she goes in the bathroom and she's taking longer than normal. And, so whatever. She comes out and she doesn't, there's no dramatic pause or anything. She opens the door and immediately she's like, you're going to be a father. And as soon as the R fell off of father, the room just stopped. Right. And I say it's like a Matrix moment, like, where
Yeah.
Neo, like, he stops the bullets and he grabs one, like,
And looks
and
at it like,
yeah, like, I'm gonna be a what? And I say that moment grounded me because up to that point, I had been chasing a career, chasing what I thought was going to define me. I was going to be Rod Richard, the strength and conditioning. I had just won strength and conditioning coach of the year for the league that I was in that year.
wow,
I was at the,
congratulations.
yeah, I was doing the thing, right? I was like, yeah, I'm really doing this thing. And then in that moment, none of it mattered. None of it had no value to me. Like being a father immediately felt like my purpose. And
Did
so
you want to be a father? before she told you?
No,
It was
no.
straight career.
Career, career,
Being
career.
married, career, career.
Yeah, because we had talk about having kids because everybody does, right? Especially when you get married. I only want to have one kid, and that was it. Like
Right.
I didn't want to have I never had designs of having a big family, or I wanted a bunch of kids, or
Even though you
I was
came from
looking
a
for
big family, that wasn't what you wanted.
no, I was good with just one kid,
Okay.
and we just we'll be parents to this kid, and it wasn't at the top of mind. It was I wouldn't even say it was it wasn't top 10, but when she said it, it was the only option is
Right.
I'm gonna be a father. And so I didn't that day, but the next morning I called my coordinator and I told him that we had found out we're gonna be parents, and it's probably gonna be it for me. And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I'm probably not gonna come back." He's like, "Well, think about it," because he actually ended up being a mentor for me, kind of through the process and it actually was what started the podcast, is talking to him. But he was like, think about it, and if you change your mind, you got time, because I didn't have to be back until January. So this was November. I didn't have to actually be back, right? I was supposed to go to Dominican for an instructional league, but he was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll find somebody else to go. You take some time to process it." And so me and my wife kind of kicked it around, and me leaving this pretty decent job, me giving up my
Did she
career
want you to
to
leave, or this was your decision?
no, no. She was like, "Stay. We'll figure it out." She's like, "We don't have to live in California. I can move out there, and we can stay. We can move to Florida, and we'll live out there." She didn't want to, but she was like, "We're gonna raise a family together. We'll move everything out there, since I had to be out there more often than in California." She's like, "You got a good job. We got a kid. We need money, right? We need the benefits and all these different things that come along with having a good job." And I was like, "No, no, because even if you do move out there, I'm really only going to be in Florida for 4 months. And then what about the other months where we're traveling and we're on the road, and I got to go to New York to be with the club, or I had to be in Tennessee, or I have to go with other levels of the organization?" And we went back and forth. And then finally she was like, "You know what? You seem pretty intent on this. So, but you're going to have to figure it out." And so I talked to my coordinator, and they actually offered me some incentives to stay, and I turned them down. And I went back to the company that I had been working with prior to leaving. And, it gave me the freedom to be at home, to be available, because I couldn't miss the doctor's appointments. I couldn't miss all of the different things that go on throughout the pregnancy. I wanted to be there for all of that, to be available for my new title.
You know what, man? I'm that is amazing because most individuals wouldn't even think like that. That was being an athlete, strength and conditioning like you, or I'm a personal trainer, professional bodybuilder as well. And I walked that path, spent numerous hours in the gym, and work became first. But not only did you give up that job, and like your wife was saying, all the things that come with that, the perk, you say, you know what? This is my first. I'm going to do whatever they can figure it out. That took a lot of guts. Did any of your past have anything to do with that decision? I know you probably was sitting there going, I know Dre's getting ready to ask me that.
No, I wasn't. But now that you do, I've never thought about it this way. But I used to, we moved, I would say, when I was young, after we left the area where we all lived together,
Mhm.
we moved every couple of years.
You
Like
got
every
time.
couple of years, we moved somewhere different. And sometimes it was better, sometimes it was worse. And so, back then when you moved, you went to a different school, right? You had to meet new people. Your life started over, basically, because there's no social media. Nobody could track who you were
Right.
prior to that. So you got to start all over, right? Now I think you can move to another location and know people just because you have interacted with them before. Back then, neighborhoods were very like segregated, I guess, for the lack of a better word. And so when you move to a new neighborhood, whatever you did in that old neighborhood, people don't know. And so I've had to start over several times in my life, right? Even in high school and college, I went from one school to another school. So I've given up or left things before, and I never thought about it until you just asked me. As you started
Never
to
know
say
what
the
I'm gonna
question,
ask.
as you started to say the question, I start thinking like, dang, I do remember. Like I've done it. This is kind of a pattern for me. I have done this before, where I can kind of just step away from something and move into something else. And so yeah, it wasn't as difficult for me as I thought it may have been. I just believed that I was going to get it done. Like I believed in myself that I was going to be able to make it happen. And so, um, yeah, I guess I had done it before, and
Mm.
I've done it since.
So when you tell me, okay, so now she's pregnant, you give up
hmm
the dream job. Take the viewers
hmm
to what happens next.
So then I stay home. I go back to work at the gym that I was working at. I had to start all over though, because I left a couple years ago. So whatever status I had in the company, they're kind of burned on. Like they're upset that I left in the first place. Because before I left, I had just opened up a brand new building for the company.
Okay.
Right, like I was operating like I had four coaches working under me, a 15,000 square foot building. Like I'm the guy. You're gonna go run
Chief of
this. And
operations. You run.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, and then I left. So so it had only
Were
been
they
open for
happy
like
that you came back, or they was like, "What is he going? What opportunity is he gonna have next?"
yeah. So one of the owners, there's two owners of the company. One of the owners was very like skeptical about having me come back, and so because of that, I had to start off at the beginning. Like I had to be a regular on the floor coach. Actually, they made me intern my first. I had a probationary period when I came back.
You sure you
Um,
found another job?
You know what I mean? I probably should have, but it ended up working out. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it was one of those things though. It was like I had a 30-day, no, it might have been longer than that, but I had a probationary period where I had to work to prove, not to prove myself, but it was one of those things, right? And
Right.
I didn't care because I had a decent amount of money that I had saved up from the previous job, and they were still paying me because I was still technically under contract.
Okay.
And so I could afford to not get paid for those 30 days and get back to work. Um, but so I started over at the bottom and obviously very quickly elevated
To
to
the
a
top.
point where I was second in command in terms of running the region. Um, but the good thing about that job is because most of the athletes we work with, if you're working with athletes, they go to school during the day. And so you train at night. So my kids are young, they don't have school. So I got to be home with them throughout, or my youngest, and then sorry, my oldest and then my youngest. Um, I'm kind of fast tracking it, right? But I was able to be home with them during the day because my wife works in the school district. So she has to be at work during the day. So it worked out perfectly because she can go to work and I'm there with the kids. And then when she comes home, then I go to work and she could be there with the kids. So it kind of worked out, like everything worked out the way it was supposed to. But I had no idea it was going to be that way going into it. I just knew that I was going to be home and we was going to figure it out, and it worked itself out.
When did you realize that the decision that you made? Tell me about the child being born. This is your first child. Walk me through that.
Um,
You quit your job. Your dream.
uh-huh.
The baby's not even here yet.
No.
The child's getting ready to be born. Tell me what happens.
It was interesting. Somebody said this to me the other day. People have pregnancies that don't go full term, right? And so I quit my job before we were even sure that, you know what I mean, that this was early. Like I had just found out. I had just found out we were pregnant. Not that we were like the baby is coming soon. Like I had found out, you know what I mean? So I really jumped the gun on this now that I think about it. But I'm there for all the doctor's appointments and there for all the back massages and all of the cravings and all of that stuff. Um, my daughter was actually supposed to be due on my wife and I's anniversary. Um, but she wanted to stay inside for a little bit longer, and we were kind of happy about that, right? Because we don't want to have to celebrate our anniversary on
And,
her birthday
yeah.
the same day. Like we'll never get another anniversary again. So she ends up being a week late. We go into the hospital because she has to be induced. and she goes through 39 hours of labor. So she wanted to have the baby naturally. So I'm labor coach Rod. I'm in there, we're sweating. My shirt is soaked. She's crushing my hand because she
You
doesn't
already
want to take.
practiced for all that though, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Well, my grip strength is on par, so you can squeeze my hand all you want to. I've been doing farmers walks. We good. um, we're taking walks around the delivery room, taking walks around the floor. Doing all that stuff, trying to get this baby to come out. Eventually, she does get the epidural. I would say hour 37, she gets the epidural, but she hasn't dilated much at all. I would say probably 5-6 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we end up having to have a C-section, not emergency but almost emergency. Like the doctor's like, hey, we can't let this go any longer, the baby's under stress. Before it becomes an emergency situation, we're going to have to do the C-section. So we end up doing the C-section, but what they discovered in the process is that my wife's cervix is posterior, meaning it's not pointing in the right direction. So she would have, without modern medicine, if we were cavemen, she would have died in childbirth.
Wow.
Because there's no way that a baby could come out when it's turned the wrong way like that. So she would have just continued to be in labor until she had a heart attack and died. So, that is a blessing and a curse, right? Because we are able to discover that as we have modern medicine now and able to get the baby and all that. But we wouldn't have known, and she would have just kept struggling through labor for however long. Like 39 hours is
That's pretty
she's a
long.
she's a beast. Like I tell her all the time, you're the strongest person I know. I don't care what happens. I don't care if you can't do 10 pull-ups. You are the strongest I know. Because I couldn't have did it. I would have been in there hour 6. Like, shoot me up. Get me out of here. But yeah, so then my daughter's born. And C-section is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's gross to be a part of, right? To be in the room, and it's difficult because you're in the room while they're performing a major surgery, and they're like cutting your wife open, and it's like, I tell my wife all the time, I still see it very clearly because I had to see it twice. I still see it very clearly, and it's an emotional thing because with a major surgery like that, anything can happen, right? It may not go the way that you want it to, and being in the room and seeing it and hearing them cut, and like, it's awful. But my daughter comes out, she's like 10 pounds, she's a giant. She's a giant baby. I get to be the first person she sees. That part is cool because
Yeah.
you're standing next to the doctor as they're doing it, and then they grab the baby and boom, right to you, all gross and slimy and gray.
Yeah.
um
Been there, been
but
there. Yeah.
but again, this was another one of those, like, I would say, matrix moments where like the world just slows down and the lights get blurry and it's just you and this kid, and it's like you get to see. So I told somebody this the other day, you get to see God's face up close, right, through your kid, because that creation of life is like, it's right in front of you, right? Like you get to feel that energy, and it's not like any other energy you'll ever feel. Like you feel vindicated, you feel like all the work that you've done up to this point is worth it, right? When you hold that kid for the first time, where they let that little sad cry out, or all that stuff
Do
is
you think that every man should experience that? And if they did experience, do you think the relationship, that the stigmatism that people have with we're not attached, would probably make a difference? I'm just hypothesis thinking on this because I experienced that and it was beautiful. I mean, from the C-section, even the actual vaginal with my son, I was there for both. And it's this, you can't even put it in words. It's almost like you just said, the matrix is right there in front of you. And you're like, holy crap, and
right.
they see your eyes. But back to the question, do you think that every man should experience that or be allowed to experience that? And if they, do you think to some degree that it will probably change the way the relationship between the man and the woman and the fatherhood and the way we actually communicate with one another?
I think every man should experience it. I think your child being being brought into the world is something that you should experience. You should be able to see. If you aren't able to be in the room, you should be very close.
Yeah.
And within the first few minutes, you should see what that little person looks like, because they look nothing like you, but they look everything like you. Right. And it's that instant bond that you feel, that, I would, in that moment, like that, as that child is getting life, that you would give your life.
Yeah.
And I think that connection piece is sometimes lost on us if we aren't able to be there. And then also for the first couple of months, I tell the new dads that I work with, for the first couple of months, you're the water boy, right? Like you're not the star player of the team. Mom's the star player of the team, right? But the water boy is important. Like you got to be there. You got to be involved. Whenever you get a chance, you got to get around that kid and get some skin to skin time, or hold them, change a diaper, right? You're not the star. Eventually you will be, but you have to be around the game. You have to get involved. And I think a lot of times in those early parts, those first 3 months, 6 months, like we don't really have, like they could at that point, they can raise a kid without us, right? They can feed them, they can do all the stuff, right? They don't really need us to be there. But how you build that bond and that relationship, it starts in those moments and that time. And if not necessarily for the kid, but also for the kid, right? Because you're building the bond from your side to that kid. You're endearing yourself to that kid. But the more that they hear your voice, the more that they get that smell, right? Because they know what you smell like. They've heard your voice before, right? Because they heard you talking to mom when they're inside, but now they get to put some figure, because they can't really see well. They put some figure with that voice, and now they start to make those connections, and that builds that bond even stronger for you as a father, from your end and the child's end. So I think, being there for the birth and then trying to be there as involved as you can early on is super important.
I can tell by your voice and your tone, this is really bringing back some crucial memories. And you know what? But it does. Even as I'm sitting here, I'm going back to my daughter. I'm going back to, my son, and the impact is unexplainable. I mean, you really can't. And when they open their eyes and stuff, and I just remember going to myself, every guy should have this experience. I think it's electrifying. It makes you look at life totally different. Those first few moments of bonding, you need to be there. All of that is cool. So let's move forward a little bit. So the child is born. What do you see differently having to take place now? Because you have fatherhood. So now what happens? You are now a father. Fatherhood is not here, but it's about to take place. Now, what did you have to bring different to this child that was absent in your growing up?
That was
First of
absent
all,
my
was your
growing up.
father there? Do you know if your father was there at your birth?
He was there. Yeah, he was
Okay.
there. And I as you know, with Black children, we were born varying shades of of Black, or
Yeah.
varying shades of color in general. And so when I was born, they thought that this is a funny story my dad tells all the time. So, you're born, and back then you go to the nursery. So all the babies in the nursery, and he goes to see me in the nursery, and there's a white family there, a grandmother that's there, and she's pointing to the baby and saying, "That's my grandson." And he looks at it, and it's got my name on it. He goes, "That's my son." And he tells a story about them arguing back and forth because she thought that I was their kid, and he was like, "No, that's my son." And she's like, "There's no way it's your son. That baby is white." And so I didn't get any real color until I was like 2 months, 3 months old.
Right. Okay.
And so they get into this argument. But so yeah, he was there. He was like I said, he was involved and present in. I actually had him on an episode of my podcast to talk about this. Him and my mother had 5 miscarriages before they had me.
Wow.
And they were at a point where they were like, maybe this isn't going to happen. And they had kind of given up on the possibility of having a child. And so they call me like their miracle child. So, he was definitely going to be there for the birth of this final like child. And I'm their, yeah, and I'm their only child together. They never had another one after me. So,
Okay.
So yeah, he was definitely there and definitely present for it. For me, after having my first daughter, there was a sense of responsibility that I had kind of started building, but like now once the kid is there, it's a real thing, right? Because when you're married, there is a sense of responsibility, but that's also an adult, right? And so she can take care of herself. Like she goes to work, she can feed herself if she needs to, she can do all these things if she needs to. But when a child comes into the picture, there's an overwhelming feeling of responsibility that you have to take care of and provide for that child. And so I immediately kind of took that on as and I would say became a bit more protective of my household and became a bit more interested in different ways to provide to making more money or being more present in whatever way I could. I think it kind of forces you to elevate a little bit. I probably was coasting in my manhood. And then when you become a father, you have to elevate to fatherhood. And I think it forced me to kind of do some things in those next few years that I hadn't been doing. Like I said, I was chasing a career. And so it was just whatever the career was having me do is what I was going to do. I was going to do my best job, right? That's just who I am. I'm going to give it 100%. But I was just like, oh, we're going to Summer League. Cool. All right. I'll be there. I'm just letting them kind of tell me what to do. And now, that I don't have that job and I have this kid, now I'm dictating what I want to do. And I'm going to set these things up to make sure that my family is taken care of the way that I want them to be taken care of. And so responsible is what I felt initially.
Hmm. I was just getting ready to think about this, and I'm trying to put it. Who did when your child was first born, your first child? Who did you
Mhm.
share your emotions to? Was it your dad? Who was the first person that you reached out to? Because now you're
Nobody.
a father. Now you're a father, not your
Yeah.
wife. Not your wife. Like, who was your confidant? Because now you got to step up now. No baseball. You got a daughter, so fatherhood is creeping in. Where's your advice coming from?
See, and this is the issue that I think a lot of young men face. Is I had nobody, right? Nobody, because up to that point I had just been a man, and as a man, we don't really confide our emotions in somebody else. We don't talk about our struggles to somebody else. We man up and we get it done.
Mhm.
Um, we may share some victories. So yeah, I told a bunch of people like, yeah, I got a baby and I'm a dad, and and I did all that, but as far as like who did I confide in? Myself. you know, um, prayer. That's probably the most that I confided in someone or something else. Um,
Did you confide in
until
your dad and your stepdad about it?
nope,
You
not
just
at
said,
all.
"I'm gonna figure this. I'm gonna figure this out."
Yep, yep, and that's part of the struggle, right? And that's why I do what I do now is because a lot of men feel that way. It's like you may talk to them, but how in depth you really get into it
Mhm.
is pretty surface level. And I'm still finding that guys are doing that. It's really surface level in terms of the questions that we ask or the things that we try to find clarity on. And it wasn't until I realized that I didn't have to do it alone, just kind of on a fluke. Like I was talking to my wife had a moms group, right? All these moms that had babies around the same time, and they would come over to the house, or she would go to their house, and they would do all these things together. And I was talking to her, and she was like, "Yeah, we were talking about X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "Dang, man, I wish I had a group." I wish I could talk to some dudes about this, and I don't know why I didn't feel like I can talk to my dad about it, because he would have talked to me about it. But I started to think like, man, I really wish we had for men something like this, some kind of support, not support group, but just like a group of dudes we could talk about like, man, you won't believe what happened last night. Baby stayed up for 10 hours, couldn't go to sleep, had to change 10 diapers, all that kind of stuff, all the things we're going through. Or, I had to work extra hours this week because we need to make ends meet, things like that. I didn't have those conversations with anybody. And so I started to reach out. And I mentioned my coordinator being a mentor for me. Um, he has four kids. And he was really cool about me leaving and, told me if I had any questions or anything come up that I could reach out to him. So I started by reaching out to him. And I called him and I kind of talked to him a little bit about what was going on. And he shared with me some things that he was experiencing or had experienced. And that was like my first unofficial podcast interview. And then from there, I think my dad was next. And then just randomly just talking to older guys. Cause you go to the gym, it's old guys at the gym all the time. Old guys, older guys,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, watch
Let
that
me say
now.
that. Yeah, yeah, let me say, let me back up. There's wiser guys at the
Yeah,
gym.
okay, yeah,
And as they get old, as guys get older, their time in between sets for whatever reason gets a little longer, and the
yeah,
conversation gets a little deeper.
yes.
And they want to talk. And so I start talking to some of those, like the regulars, right? The guys that are there every morning at 5 a.m. I start talking to them and like picking their brain about it. And they start sharing stuff with me about things that they had gone through or things that, maybe I should be looking forward to. Or, when men are older, we have such great sage advice, you know what I mean? Like things that they didn't think about when they were younger, but now we're older and we're like, oh, we can share. You know what? I didn't do this when my kids were young, but I realized how important it is. So maybe this is what you should do. Stuff like that. And I was like, man, this is really cool, And so I just continued to do that and continue to do that until I had talked to so many people about fatherhood. I was like, man, I should make this a thing and start recording these things.
With your podcast, Fatherhood, what are some of the things that men, you don't have to mention their names, but what are some of the topics that men do talk about on your show that, because believe me, I'm a firm believer we need this, because I wish there was somebody I could have talked to about. I'm gonna tell you a true story. When my daughter was born, I didn't know how to wash her up, and my clients came over and said, well, you got to put them in the sink. Put her in the sink. I was like, what you about the sink? Well, we give you this bucket. Blah, blah. I'm trying to figure this out. So what are some of the things that the guys are sharing with you on your show, on your podcast?
Yeah, I mean, this is really some of those things, right? Things like that, where it's like, you just don't know, right? Because how would you? You've never done it before, right? And
Right.
nobody told you before. Um, a lot of times, guys, like there's the baby books. We don't read them. We say we do. We don't read them. We
I
be
never
like
read a doctor's log.
we skim the book.
Yeah.
Maybe we pretend
We
we
look at
read
the
it, but we don't
pictures.
know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So a lot of what we talk about, especially in the early parts of fatherhood, is just the not knowing things that we wish we would have known. Um, we talk a lot about like I mentioned, the responsibility piece, and understanding how important that is. We talk a lot about the being present, and how important our actual presence, like not even having to actually do anything, but just being present and available, is really important. And I think it's really interesting that no matter who I talk to, no matter what stage they are at in life or success, like we have multi-millionaires on the podcast, and we've had, regular everyday working men on the podcast, and they have the same struggles. They have the same things going on, right? Or at least very similar. They things parallel, right? Like millionaire problems are a little different than regular everyday problems, but in terms of fatherhood, we're all experiencing some of the same things. And so, we just have the conversations. It's something different in everyone, but I think what we find is the common thread is we didn't have the conversation before we became a father. Like nobody told us what to expect in fatherhood. And so we go into it almost with blinders on, trying to figure it out. It's like somebody threw a puzzle onto a table, but they didn't give you the box with the picture. They just put the pieces of the puzzle out there and like, all right, you get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
So what's the number one thing that you find the fathers are reaching out to you about or sharing on your podcast? Give me the
um,
top three.
top three. What I just mentioned is just the not knowing what they didn't know, right? Like just not having the information and the awareness because there isn't enough conversation about it, or maybe there is, but we don't seek it out, right? We don't Google it until we have the problem, right? We don't we don't start looking for what's wrong with us until that bump on our arm starts oozing, and we're like, oh man, let me Google this thing, right?
Okay.
Um, and that's just a manhood issue. A lot of guys talk about that in relation to not having a community, or a brotherhood or a group of men that we can talk to, that we feel comfortable sharing with, and understanding that as you get older and as you parent a little bit longer, you understand the importance of having that. And then I think the last thing that's really come up a lot is the financial literacy piece of it, and having to have your finances in order, feeling like you have to have them in order, and then also understanding that you can still build those finances as your child is growing. I think that's been one that's been really, really important, because when you go from supporting yourself and maybe a wife or a girlfriend, and not always the case, but in some cases, right? And you guys are doing pretty good. When you bring that child in, one, the doctor's fees are expensive unless you have really good coverage through your job. Um, as an independent contractor or somebody who runs your own business, that can get really expensive.
Mm.
When you're going to see the doctor, and having a baby is $1 million feat in itself. in itself.
Yeah.
Um, so having a better understanding of finances, because I don't think we get that in school. We definitely not. I don't think we don't get that in school. And if there's not enough conversation about it in our house, then we walk into the next stage of our life without any understanding and clarity on that. And so we've been talking a lot about the financial piece of it.
Before we wrap up, I'm gonna ask two questions. This has been really good too. We talked about your journey from a young man to a man, giving up your career to be a father. What have you taken out of that journey into what's happening now? Because now you have two daughters. So
Mm-hmm.
now what have your life lessons from that era taking you to today?
Um, One, I have a firm believer, and that I can bet on myself, right? Because like I said, I left one job and just believed that I was gonna make it happen. Left left the job that I came back to again and just knew that I was gonna make it happen. So I believe in my ability to get it done. It may be some struggles in it, but I believe that I can make it happen. And I think everybody can, because when your back is against the wall, you got two choices. You can fight your way out, or you can give up, and giving up just ain't in my DNA. Right. Um, you know what I mean? Like I can, first of all, I
Yeah.
can't give up because I got two people that depend on me for sure. Like my wife, if I give up, she can move on and marry somebody else, and her life will be similar to what it is now. She'll never find nobody like me, but but she can have a similar life, right? But my
Yeah.
kids are never going to replace their father, right? And so I can't give up because they depend on me. Um, and that is both a motivation and a burden, right? It pushes me to do more than I would want to do, right? When I want to rest, it pushes me to get out and do more and be more. But then also it's like, it's a little bit of a baggage that I carry, is that I'm a father, and I don't get to just make decisions for myself. I have to make decisions with them in mind, and what I do is going to reflect on them at some point. And so, even most recently, I just opened up another gym. I said that I was never going to get back into the gym business. I promised that I wasn't going to do it, but my partner had an opportunity I really couldn't say no to. We didn't have to put up any capital. The other part of the business was going to pay for the building, pay for all the equipment, turf the floors, buy
No,
all
no
the
brainer.
weights, so I'm like, all right, I'm back in this thing, right? But I told them in the meeting, I was like, look, I am going to come into this, and when you have me, you're going to have 100% of me. But just understand that if anything happens with my family schedule, I am not going to negotiate my time with family for this business, and you have to be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, I'm going to wash my hands right now and walk away from it. And that's different for me now. It's like I won't do anything that's going to take me away from this, right? Because I've allowed myself to be taken away before, and I'm not going to sacrifice that for any amount of money or status or position in my community. I don't need to. This is the most important title that I have. Being Coach Rod is not it.
Man, that's deep. Okay, but last question. So we can stay here for another hour, which we will have back on part two. That beast frame of mind. Been in, you've been out, you've overcome, you conquered. Your dream is coming true. You started this podcast. Leave the viewers with something positive. But before you leave the viewers with something positive, how can viewers reach you to come in and speak to them, or how can they contact you if they need your help?
So I'm most active on Instagram at 4Fit Fatherhood, the number 4Fit Fatherhood. I reply to not every DM, because you get some that are like, as you know, right?
Yeah.
But I am people are typically surprised that I'm like, oh, this is really you? Like, yeah, it's really me. And so I'm open to conversation. I'm here to help. Like my goal is to try to help people selfishly. And I say this all the time, is selfishly, my goal is to help you become a better man and a better father, because I need you to create better men and better women, like your children. I need your children to be great. And for you to be great, you'll create better children, because my children have to grow up in the world with your children. Right. And so if you aren't doing your job as a father, now my kid got to grow up with a bunch of jerks, and I don't want that. Right. So selfishly, I'm helping you be great because I need my kids to grow up in a good environment. And so I'm really open to talking to anybody. You can email me though. Same thing, the number 4fitfatherhood@gmail. And then the website is 4fitfatherhood.com. Again, the number 4. So it's all pretty much the same. I'm on Twitter too, but I rarely am ever on Twitter.
Okay.
But again, 4Fit Fatherhood.
Now leave the viewers with something positive moving forward.
Okay, let me do this. So we're talking about beast mentality or beast mode, and this is something that I literally just this Tuesday I had a sit down with one of my 18U teams, and they're talking about turning it off and turning it on. Right? They feel like they're good athletes, and so it's game time. We just gonna show up, but in practice they were trash. They were trash last week, like super frustrating. But they're really talented kids.
Okay.
And I'm like, yo, beast mode or being a beast is not a light switch. It's not something that you turn off or on. It's more like a dimmer, like a volume button. You can turn it down or you can turn it up. And it's situational, right? When you're a beast, you may need to be more of a lion in that situation. But lions aren't always hunting. Sometimes they have to rest, so they turn it down. But don't forget that lion is a lion, because when they turn up, that's your ass. And so
you're preaching.
so you have to, when we talk about that beast mentality, when we talk about that, like you are the as a father, you're the CEO of your family. You are the boss, right? And the boss doesn't get to stop being the boss, right? You are the boss. Don't get to take vacation like that, right? You have to continue to be the boss. And so while you may turn that down, right, and you may not have to wear that boss hat so often, when it's time, the boss needs to roar, right? The boss needs to be the boss. And so keep that hat on, man. Just, you just might tilt it a little bit, right? But when you pull it down, everybody know it's time to go to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, that has been no other than Big Rod the second Richards on the Andre the Beast Crayton show.